So we need to try to think about what the Christian tradition means when they use the word sin. And now sin is a term that oftentimes in society we just think we know what it means and we kind of throw it around. Oh, that's a sin. This is sinful. You're a sinner. But I want to try to think or thoughtfully think through some of this stuff. So the first two things is the term sin is simply a vision of of an attempt to try to diagnose what has gone wrong with the world. So there is a difference between kind of capital S sin, and that's what we're going to be talking now about right now. And this is the larger scope, the theologically very, very broad definition of what has gone wrong. And so when Christians say, well, sin is kind of one of the fundamental problems, they are not talking about small s sins, like me tripping a grandma when she walks across the street, or me stealing from, I don't know, a mall or something like that. Those are small s sins. What we're really trying to talk about is the larger definition. What is it that Christians mean when they use the word sin? Now, one thing that I really enjoy about the Christian tradition is that, especially in the Bible, it, Christians are very realistic about this issue. They don't sugarcoat it. They don't say, "Oh, like humans are perfect. Oh, like I'm such a good individual." No, Christians really are quite realistic when it comes to the definition of sin. So I want to turn to the book of Genesis. Now, if you are unfamiliar, you'll need to go back and read Genesis 2 and 3. Or you'll need to go back and watch the videos on that so you're familiar with this. So we're going to look at the second creation narrative just briefly and broadly. We're not going to read the text again because we've already done that. But the second creation narrative is the one where God creates a human and puts this human in a garden. The human's job is to till and to keep the garden. God then creates a whole bunch of animals trying to find a helper and a partner for this human. Finally, God creates a woman for this man. And they live peacefully together in this garden. Now, you'll remember that they have permission to eat of any tree in the garden, but then there's also a prohibition, and that's not to eat of the fruit of the tree that is in the middle of the garden. So again, if you need to go back, please stop this video and go look at the stuff on the second creation narrative. Uh, Most scholars look at this again as myth, as epic literature, not as historical fact. So was there literally a garden? Well, probably not. But is this story profoundly true in how it really articulates the heart of the issue for Christians and for Jews? Absolutely. So the other night I was talking with my wife, and somehow the second creation narrative and the fall narrative of Genesis 3 came up. And I said, essentially, well, and I don't even remember what exactly we were talking about, but I said, that is the sin of Genesis 3. So what Genesis does, especially Genesis 2 and 3, is it really tries to take a very creative analysis of what has gone wrong with humanity. And I think it really does take a very, very realistic look at this issue. So what is the theme? When the human beings eat of the fruit of the tree, is the sin there that they ate of the tree? They disobeyed God. Well, no. Remember, go back to that video. What that tree represented, so the tree of knowledge of good and evil, what that tree represents, especially in ancient literature, is the divine. God is the one who knows. God knows good, God knows evil. God is wholly other. God is supreme. God is transcendent. And so that tree there is symbolic of the human attempt to try to become like God. The other tree, the tree of life, again, has very, very similar connotations, that it is God who lives forever. It is God who has no beginning, who has no end. And then, therefore, the sin of the man and the woman when they are trying to eat of that tree is really to try to become like God, to try to embody, the divine power that God actually has. And what's so interesting is when they eat of the fruit of the tree, God shows up. And God says to the man, "What is this that you've done?" And if you'll remember, who does the man blame? Because the man says, the woman whom you gave to me, she gave me the fruit of the tree and I ate. The man blames God. So early on in the book of Genesis, we start to see that humans really want to be God. They want to grasp the things, the power, the prestige, the image that is not theirs. And then the other thing in the book of Genesis is that when relationships are broken, we blame others. When something fundamentally happens, we blame other people. And so therefore, the theme, the major theme, and this is going to be one of the ways in which we're going to define sin, is estrangement. So when you read that narrative, you realize that when they eat of the fruit of the tree, God doesn't kill them. God actually, in the end of Genesis chapter 3, he gives them clothes. He clothes them with leather. He cares for them. He protects them. He actually removes them from the garden so they don't eat also from the tree of life. But what is very evident in that narrative is that there is now a difference in the relationship between God and humans. There is now estrangement. What used to be together, what used to be a combined and united relationship is now broken. So one of the main ways in which Christians have long have long talked about sin is estrangement, is broken relationships. And what's so interesting in that narrative, and here again, I love how ancient epics really try to unpack the truth of this, is that the estrangement is not merely between God and humans. It's also between humans and humans. The man and the woman they're blaming each other. The woman is blaming the animal, the serpent there. So there is, in a sense, like a seven-part estrangement here. So between God and humans, between humans and other humans, between humans and animals, between animals and God, humans and the very creation itself and God. And then finally, and this is very interesting with what we're going to be talking about later on, there is brokenness and estrangement within oneself. Christians necessarily argue that I myself am even estranged from my own being. So one of the main ways, you need to understand this, that Christians define sin is broken relationships, is estrangement. So, and that's the capital S, like the large sin. And what they really mean by that is sin, capital S, large sin, is brokenness, is broken relationships. And so when God and humanity used to be united together, now that relationship has been broken. And so what God has been doing throughout all of human history is to try to reconcile that relationship. We see this in the book of Genesis, Exodus, all throughout the Hebrew Bible. We see this most fully for Christians in Jesus, that God becomes human to reconcile this relationship, to unite it. And so, therefore, as I said earlier, sin is merely an attempt to try to identify what has gone wrong. So, what has gone wrong in Christianity is sin, is estrangement, is broken relationships. Now, here, these are several different terms that Christians use to help unpack, to help elaborate upon what they mean by the word sin. Sometimes they use the archery metaphor, like missing the mark, wandering from the path, breaking the law of God. So if God says care for the poor, and I don't care for the poor, maybe that can be defined as sin. Rejecting the relationship, breaking harmony. This is really interesting. Disrupting the harmony of creation. And again, these are tons of different metaphors. Sin is blindness to God. It's a hard heart. It's stubbornness. It's a stick neck. It's not neck. Hatred of the neighbor. Remember, Jesus says, love God and love your neighbor. Transgression, moral follies, the disease of the soul, the destruction of peace. And so notice again, these are all metaphors. These are all words in which that help us understand what the term sin means. If I'm addicted to evil, I'm really addicted to breaking down relationships, not only with me and God, but also with other people. And so one of the main ways, as I've said, that Christians use to define the word sin, it's the breakdown of union. It's the breakdown of relationships. So sin is the war of the flesh against the spirit, the war of the passions against the mind. Um, Here, this one is pretty interesting. Sin is the gap that exists between what we know to be right and what we actually do. And fundamentally, sin is the disfigurement of the nature. Sin is not the way it's supposed to be. So again, so these are just metaphors. This is language that helps us understand how deep the brokenness is. Okay, this isn't something, a good doctrine of sin really tries to unpack what has gone wrong. Why is the world the way it is? And what has gone wrong with the world for Christians is that there is a deep disfigurement. Here, I'll move over. A deep disfigurement of our nature. That we are, on the one hand, capable of profound good, and on the other hand, we are capable of profound evil. Sin is not the way it's supposed to be. And so, to continue here, in the Hebrew Bible, I think it's the book of Proverbs, there are 7 sins that the Christians have kind of picked up on, and they've called these the 7 deadly sins. So I'm going to list all of them here, and notice the ones on the left, these are the ones that are listed in the book of Proverbs. And notice how these break down relationships. Pride. So if somebody is overly prideful, that is an action, that is a trait that breaks relationships. Over and against humility. Humility, if somebody is humble, if somebody is meek, that is a way to unite relationships. Greed, true and profound greed breaks down relationships. It really harbors resent and hatred. If somebody is overly greedy, then they are necessarily estranged from not only their neighbor but also God. Envy, anger, lust, gluttony, sloth, not the little animals, but just laziness. It's interesting, in the Hebrew Bible, laziness, not caring, not devoting yourself to the best that you can be and the best that you can do. That is one of the ways in which they've defined the word sin. So notice all of these terms over here, these move somebody away from God. These are vices. These break down relationships. They perpetuate breaking relationships as opposed to rejoining, reconciliation, rejoining the relationships. So these are some of the 7 deadly sins that Christians have long used to unpack what this word means. Now here, what are some of the social sins that we see in our world? So sin is not just something that I do individually. There is perhaps the sin of sexism. I just read, before I recorded this, an article that in South Carolina, there are some pastors of churches who are female, and they have, the churches and the female ministers have been receiving very, very threatening letters to their lives, arguing that a woman should never lead a church. Is there sexism a part of society? Me, because I am a man, am I treated differently? Am I paid differently than women? So one of the long social sins of human history is racism. I really think it's healthy to have the conversation, does racism still exist? In what ways is racism still manifest? And notice, what racism does is it breaks down relationships. It separates people. It leads to estrangement. It does not lead to reconciliation. It does not lead to rejoining relationships as we are supposed to be. So, man, one of the biggest sins of the civil rights movement was segregating people who were human beings, who are human beings. It's so interesting. There was a piece on NPR that I was listening to a while back, and it was a discussion from sociologists and anthropologists, and they were talking about race. And they were trying to ask the question, is race an idea that is created? Because if you look at it genetically, people are, especially human beings, are Homo sapiens. They are all human. There is nothing genetic genetically different between somebody who lives in Uganda and me and somebody who lives in Russia and Antarctica and Australia. We have all of the same DNA. We are all of the same species. And yet our society has created these barriers to separate something which God intends to bring together. So sexism, racism, and here we can keep on going. Injustice. When there is injustice, when somebody is favored, is looked out for more than somebody else down here. When there is not justice, when there is not equality, maybe that is some of the social sins that Christians have long talked about. Exploitation. Man, it's fascinating reading of stories how people across the world are exploited. Even like the clothes that I wear. The clothes that I wear probably, and I am pretty confident in saying this, are made by people who are exploited. And I like them because they're cheap. I like them that I can go to Gap or J. Crew, or this is I think from Banana Republic, and I can buy a shirt for $40 or $30. And I really wonder who made the shirt. People are exploited because of their bodies. Young children, young girls in many parts of the world are kidnapped and thrown into sex slavery because they are exploited because because of their bodies. So exploitation, when somebody is being dehumanized, when the relationship of humanity is broken, this is another way, another layer in which Christians use to define the word sin. So we can keep on going. When discrimination happens, when somebody is discriminated upon because of the color of their skin, because of their gender, because of their sexual orientation, because of whatever it may be, that this is another way in which Christians use to define the word sin. Bigotry, hatred, intolerance. Now notice all of these that I've listed right here, they break down relationships. Okay, they fundamentally break relationships. They do not bring about reconciliation. And so again, the main way that Christians have defined the word sin is estrangement, is broken relationships, sin are the very things that we do intentionally and unintentionally that break the union with God, with other people. So in the New Testament, when Jesus says, love God and love your neighbor, sin is the very thing that breaks our relationship with God and breaks our relationship with other people. So a few more metaphors here. Sin as pride. The Sermon on the Mount in Matthew 5, Jesus says, blessed are the poor in spirit, blessed are the meek, the humble. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. A disordered desire. So, if I do want to exploit another person, if I do want to use another person as an object, that is a disorder, that is a desire that is not right, that is a desire that has gone awry. And we see this oftentimes in our world. Sin can be idolatry. When I look at and worship something else, whether it be money, whether it be myself, whether it be my image, whether it be celebrities, that whenever we bow down and worship somebody other than God, that is another metaphor that Christians have used to define the word sin. Sin is a perversion of love, because love unites, love brings together, and sin is apathy, is hatred, is something that uniquely separates two groups that ought to be united. A few more. So sin is the murderous killing of character. It is selfishness. If somebody is overly selfish, if they only are concerned with themselves and what they want, what they need, then they are only looking out for themselves, not the greater good. And maybe they're breaking down relationships. And then also ingratitude. One of the things I love about my wife is she keeps a thankful journal where she daily she writes down the very things that she's thankful for. If somebody is full of gratitude, is full of thankfulness, they are much more open to the uniting of relationships, of noticing the similarities of other people, and here I'm trying to get to the core of it, of noticing the humanness of others. One of the other ways in which Christians define the word sin is dehumanization. If I do something that dehumanizes, that strips another individual of their very humanness, then I am breaking the truth that they were created in the image of God. And so where we need to go now in the next video is to talk about if that is the problem, if sin is fundamentally, let me get back there, if sin is fundamentally defined as estrangement, as broken relationships right here, then salvation, the solution, has to deal with the uniting of relationships that were once broken. So if sin is the problem, if sin is the destruction of those relationships, then reconciliation is what salvation is going to be about. So if sin is the breaking down of relationships, what Christians end up saying is that what God did in Christ is to uniquely and finally act in such a way to unite humans with God, to unite humans with other humans, to unite humans with creation, with animals, and then to unite humans with themselves. Because, again, as Christians argue, that they are created in the image of God.